sacrifice shit. No man could go against me. Test me, you must be bent, G. Don't tempt me. I had this full clip for so long, it needs to empty.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. We got another video, college football video, in the way here. I was not planning on making this video. I've just been thinking about Tennessee a lot lately, and I figured just today, I'm like, well, you know what? I did several preseason team spotlights. Why not do a midseason team spotlight? Because I've been thinking a lot about Tennessee, and a lot of the questions I had preseason, they haven't been answered. But also, not just that, they have taken a turn in some ways that I thought they would, in some other ways where I certainly did not think they would. So it's a very interesting team, and I want to talk about them with y'all. Let's get right into it. First of all, looking at what they did, well, just so far this year, they're 4-1. They started the season off at number 12. I had them at 11, so I was slightly higher on Tennessee than the AP poll was. They got as high as 9, I believe, after their win versus Virginia. They got as low as 23rd after their loss to Florida. I thought you very could have, made a case that they could have been unranked after that loss. Um, Ending ranking not the end yet. They've won 2 games twice before and after the Florida game. Right now, I have them at 18. So again, one spot higher than they currently are ranked at 19 in the AP poll. Taking a look just at that schedule as a whole, they started the season up. Virginia was a very good game. It was a very good game, not only because they blew Virginia out, but because they tested the deep ball. I think I'm not I don't want to say who it was, either Ramel Keaton or Squirrel White dropped like what would have been like a 60-plus yard touchdown from Joe Milton. So even in the loss, they showed things that's like, oh, they could have played better than they played in this game. So, you know, it was a good start. Austin Peay was more difficult. Offense struggled more. But especially defensively, you could see those first 2 games are like, oh shit, only 13 points allowed back-to-back games. This is not what we saw last season. Then the Florida game came around, and it's very strange because if you look at the box score, it's not even like Florida played all that well. Not taking anything away from them, they still beat Tennessee handedly. But it's like Tennessee, it's weird. It's, where do you place your finger on for that loss? I didn't really get a consistent answer when I looked at the fan comments, when I watched the game myself. I don't really know how to put it. It's just Tennessee looked out of whack, and they haven't looked like that since. They beat up on UTSA and they beat South Carolina handedly, which is really one of their, games I'm sure they circled before the season started, obviously knowing what South Carolina did to them last season. So it's it's so strange, man, because you look at 3 games, they've scored 40 plus, and they've won by well over 20 points, right? But then you look at the Austin Peay game and the Florida game, back-to-back weeks, where it's like, man, those were really lackluster performances, especially considering, a loss to a Florida team, which I feel like you should have beat soundly. I think Tennessee's a much better team than Florida. So I don't get it, man. I think Tennessee certainly, just looking at the stretch, first I'll mention this stretch, then I'll compare it to last year. Looking at this stretch, me personally, I thought they would be 5-0. I think you can inject even, looking in hindsight, you could say, okay, they should have won that Florida game. They should be 5-0 right now. But they didn't. That's a disappointment on Tennessee's part. Last season, they played 3 ranked teams in their first 5 games, including ranked Florida, a much better Florida team than this, ranked LSU, which ended up being the SEC West champions, beat Alabama, and Pitt. I mean, Pitt, I guess you could say they were overrated. They're kind of like TCU last season, but still a ranked Pitt team, better than this year's Pitt at least. So 3 ranked wins for last year's Tennessee team, and they started off 5-0. This team played no ranked teams yet, and they're 4-1. Obviously, the big point is last year's team was much better than this Tennessee's team. I acknowledge that. That's the point. They lost so much talent where I feel like people, including myself, may have underestimated just how much talent they lost. Looking at the team stats here, I hope you can see everything. I'll clarify so last season they were the best offense in the country, without a shadow of a doubt. Number one, yards per game and points per game, best in the country. Uh, they were a top 5 passing offense. Uh, top 5 passing offense, and they ran the ball incredibly well, 26th in the country. So that was one of the things I pointed out was I expected that running number to increase to top 10, maybe even top 5. I was right about that, because this year, just look at the comparison. Offense is significantly worse. 60 yards a game is a lot. Obviously, the passing game has taken a massive drop off, even more than was expected. I did not expect, especially early, for Joe Milton to just come in and light the world on fire like Hendon Hooker did last season. However, I certainly expected. I mean, if you would have told guys, if 100, think about 100 yards per game just through the air, that is mass. That's astronomical. 100 yards a game. Like, it's easy to say, but when you actually think about it, that's ridiculous. It's the same coach. Several of the same receivers, I'd argue the top two are gone, certainly the best. But still, it's a lot of the same pieces. Milton played some games last. I don't really have an answer. I don't have an answer for why the passing offense has taken such a steep decline from last season. But the running attack, this was expected, right? We expected because all three of their top backs returned, and we expected, at least I did, for them to run the ball more in order to take pressure off of Joe Milton. So both those things are true. The points per game is down significantly. So over 100 yards in the passing game and over 10 points per game down. Still good. Still 31st in the country. If you put up 34.8 points per game, you're a pretty damn good team, at least offense. Um, but yes, to go from the number one scoring offense to the 31st, obviously a massive drop off. The sacks allowed, those stats are obviously skewed because they're running significantly more, which I like. I embrace that. I think that's good for Tennessee. But, still, certainly you could say Joe Milton has not been pressured that much, at least just from the raw sack numbers. What I don't like is that they're turning the ball over significantly more. They protected the football at an incredible rate last season. This season, they're just on pace to have significantly more turnovers than they did last season. Um, Defensive, this is the key for me. The run game is significant change that I expected. Defense, I was not ready for this. I was not because it's almost like they just completely changed the profile of their team in 1 year. Defensively, guys, how do you give up 100 less yards per game? Tell me. I think some of that is because when you throw the ball less, when you run the ball more, there's a significant amount of time that I'm sure Tennessee's time of possession, I should have looked at that. I'm sure it is massively increased this season compared to last season because they scored so fast last season. I'm sure their opponent possessions are down significantly because 100 less yards a game allowed defense. That's massive. That might be the biggest jump in all of college football. And if it's not, I'm certain it's top 3 or top 5. I mean, last season they were 91st. This season they're 21st, almost top 20 in yards allowed. Look at the passing. Look at the passing, guys. 100 yet less passing yards allowed per game. The rushing yards are almost exactly the same, which I mean, they were a good rush defense last season, so they're actually allowing less right now. So I'd say that's still very good, even though it's 35th in the country. I'd say that's still pretty solid, and especially when you're not allowing the other team to throw the ball. I mean, look at this. First of all, points per game. Points per game significantly less. They were already a good points per game defense last season, but to get even better on what was your strength last season, that's incredibly impressive. That's incredibly impressive. Top 25 as far as points per game allowed. They're the number one team in the country at sacking the opposing quarterback. Where did this come from? I was not expecting this whatsoever. When I looked at the preview of their defense, I just didn't see it. I didn't see the dominant. I thought they lost their best pass rusher in Byron Young to the NFL. I didn't know who was going to replace him. I didn't know. And they got a couple guys. They got multiple guys with over 4 sacks. And to go from 40 to first, guys, to first in sack, that's incredible. And then takeaways, they're not getting as many. They will certainly not have. I can guarantee you, they will not have 20 plus takeaways. Maybe not even close. I don't know if they're going to get like 16, 17. They might finish with only like 12, 13 takeaways this season, which is fine. Just because you were top 25 last season doesn't mean you need to be, because they're not taking the ball away as much as they were last season, and they're still down in 5 points per game and over like damn near 100 yards per game. So what I mean by changing the whole team profile, this was kind of like a Washington or a USC from last season where they threw the ball all over the place but didn't play much defense at all. And this season they look like Georgia. They look like 2021 Georgia. Great, because look at this. Just look at their defensive statistics. Tell me this is not a top 20 defense in the country. At worst, you can say top 25. Who would have thought that going into the season? That's my point. Who would have thought that Tennessee, besides me, would be a top 10 rushing team and nobody, top 10 rushing and a top 25 defense? That's a complete shift. How does that happen in one season? That's the real point I'm making this video, because they're 4-1, but they're doing it completely differently than they did the year before. That's so interesting to me. So looking at this comparison right here, certainly I'm not trying to say that, Joe Milton should be what Hendon Hooker was playing at a Heisman level. I understand that. But in the first 5 games, last season and this year, they thrown the same amount of touchdowns, but obviously 3 interceptions for Milton, not what you want to see. The completion percentage is significantly less, and I mean almost 350 yards less than Hooker during the start of last season. But look at the rushing difference. It's the same group, same exact group. Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson, and only 11 more touches. They're just more efficient with their touches, incredibly more efficient with their touches. Almost like, what's that, 450 yards more than the previous season, or 350 yards more, I think. Yeah, 350. And the wide receiver, this I think is a big reason for a drop off in the passing game. It's just, you know, maybe Joe Milton just isn't comfortable throwing it deep, or maybe Josh Heupel isn't comfortable letting Milton throw it deep as comfortable as he was with Hooker last season. I'm not sure why, but certainly you could say losing the best deep threat in all of college football. I think that would certainly play a hand in it. In Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman being gone also doesn't help. And Brew McCoy, he didn't look like the same player. He recently suffered a season-ending injury, so he's just out moving forward. So now you're left with Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton. Hopefully they start using Dante Thornton, that big transfer from Oregon. I've not seen much of him. Hopefully, with the injury to Brew McCoy, he gets some more opportunities, because I think he could be just their best playmaker in general moving forward. But the receiver core took a massive hit, and it's taken another massive hit in losing Brew McCoy. So it's, Joe Milton is certainly not working with the same weapons that Hendon Hooker had to work with. But like I said, the running game has kind of picked up the slack, per se. No shit. All right, here we go. So what do I think moving forward here? The first 5 games were decided. Let's look forward, and this is the tough thing. They play 5 teams moving forward that could all be losses. A&M, Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri, Georgia, right? Look, the only way Tennessee had a shot at the college football playoff, which is why I always thought from the beginning it was unrealistic. That's why I had them outside the top 10. The only real way they had a shot was if they started 5-0, which they didn't. I mean, losing to Florida, it ended their college football playoffs hope right then and there. Okay, because they don't have the breathing room in the schedule to bounce back and cover up that loss, because there's a loss in here somewhere, right? There's another loss in there, and those 2 losses right there, you probably missed the SEC championship game just based off that right there. So the Florida loss killed their season. But as far as looking forward, what do I think is going to happen? Well, A&M, it's certainly losable, but coming off the bye, and you get A&M at home, I think is a massive benefit for Tennessee. On top of that, them being the better team in general, better coach team, I think. So that's four things, I give to Tennessee just right off the bat there, four advantages there. So I do have them taking that game clearly, but I don't think it'll be, a blowout or anything. I think it's going to be a close game. But I do have them beating A&M. That's not debatable in my mind. Tennessee versus Bama, I can't tell you why. I really can't give you many reasons, but I do have Tennessee beating Alabama for the second year in a row. Alabama has home field advantage. They did not have that last season. It took Tennessee everything they had last season to beat Bama and then some. That being said, these are two absolutely different teams. If you hear anybody trying to compare this game in week 8 to last season's game, throw out their opinion because they have no idea what they're talking about because they're not even close. Neither of these teams, both these teams have had massive drop-offs in quarterback play and really just a change in play styles overall. So trying to compare last season's game to what this year's game will be, it makes no sense. They're delusional. With that being said, I think Tennessee runs the ball much better than Alabama. I think Tennessee protects their quarterback much better than Alabama. I think Joe Milton is less turnover prone than Jalen Milroe. With that being said, I think at home, I might edge the advantage slightly to Jalen Milroe, but I think it's a toss-up. I would not be surprised if any of these quarterbacks plays great and the other plays horribly. It's a complete wild card as far as quarterback play in this game. But the things I do trust, I trust Tennessee more offensively to run the football. Alabama's defense, I'd give a clear edge, but I do think Tennessee, let me put it this way. I think Tennessee's defense is going to give Jalen Milroe more problems than I think Alabama's defense is going to give Tennessee's run game problems because that's Tennessee's strength. It's not Joe Milton. It's not the passing game. It's their running game. They're top 10 in the country. They're seventh in the country. If Bama wants to beat Tennessee, they got to shut down the run game, not the pass game. If Tennessee wants to beat Bama, they have to shut down the deep ball from Jalen Milroe because Alabama's going to try and nickel and dime the whole way, and Milroe will make a mistake if that's the case. He loves to throw it deep. If he can bomb on you, that's how they beat A&M. But if he can't bomb on you, he's going to make a mistake. He's going to get sacked a lot. Alabama's going to turn it over, and I got Tennessee taking that game 27-24. After that, I think they'll be ranked in the top 12. If they beat A&M and Alabama, I think they certainly will be ranked in the top 12. Kentucky is a trap game. Coming off Alabama, probably going to be beat up a lot. Very physical game. Probably going to suffer a couple injuries. Kentucky is a trap game because they dominated Kentucky last season. This is a much better Kentucky team, if you ask me. Better quarterback play. Yes, I said that. Better run game. Receivers, more experienced, even though they're not playing like it. Uh, it's gonna be close, if you ask me. I do have Tennessee taking that game though, even though it's certainly losable. I would not pick. I think this will be a much tougher game than A&M. Let me put it that way, because I think at this point, this is what 3 weeks from now. I think Kentucky will have solved a lot of their offensive passing game struggles by that point. So I have Tennessee taking that game narrowly, but I would not be shocked at all if they look the worst. If they look worse at Kentucky than they did versus Bama, that wouldn't shock me whatsoever. But I do have Tennessee taking that game as well as dominating UConn. So after those two games, against Missouri now, I have Tennessee in the top 10. I think they lose that game. I think they'll be looking ahead to Georgia. And you might be saying, how the hell could they beat Bama and lose to Missouri? It's pretty simple, actually. Missouri's a much better offense than Alabama. Much better. Not close, actually. They have a quarterback who can throw it downfield consistently. They have a number one receiver. They have a better running back. They're more consistent than Alabama offensively. They don't give up as many sacks. You want me to keep going? Missouri's a much better offense than Alabama. Their problem is their defense. So I do think this will be a pretty high scoring game. Um, probably the most points. I said probably the most points Tennessee will put up in a loss this season. I think will be against Missouri. I just don't think they can stop Missouri. I don't know if Tennessee can win a shootout this year, like they did last year against Bama. I just, I just think Missouri has them beat so clearly because if Tennessee takes a lead, I think Missouri can pass out of that and come back. I don't think the opposite is true. I don't trust Joe Milton at this point in time. And I just think with them looking ahead to Georgia, I just think this is a very losable game. And I don't think they're going to go through this whole stretch. I just, A&M, Bama, Kentucky, Missouri, I don't think they're winning all four of those at all. Who do I give that loss to? I just have it as Missouri. You could have it Kentucky, A&M, or Bama. I think any one of those could be true, but I'm going to give Missouri that edge in that game. After that loss, I would still have them in the top 15 probably because Missouri, I think, will also be a ranked team, very good team, 8-9 wins. That Georgia game, it's a bigger difference than last season because both teams lost a lot of talent, but Georgia replaced that talent. They got a better quarterback as far as being able to throw the football than Tennessee has right now. They have a better defense slightly because Tennessee's not a bad defense, but Georgia still has a better defense. It's just the gap is still wide. This could have been a year for Tennessee to close the gap if Joe Milton was that guy. He's just not that guy so far. So I have Georgia taking that game again pretty clearly. After that, Tennessee, I think, falls, out of the top 20, beats up on Vanderbilt, and sneaks back into the top 20. So I have that then at 9-3, obviously not good enough to make the SEC championship game. But finishing the season in the top 20, guys, if this were to happen exactly as I predicted, some people would call this a disappointment. I call those people idiots. I don't know how anybody 3 years ago would foresee a world where Tennessee beats Alabama back-to-back years, at home and on the road. I'm speaking like it's a fact. It could very well not happen. But if it did happen, you would still have people calling their season as a whole a disappointment, even though they won, 19 games over 2 years, 20 if you include the bowl game against Clemson, I think, right? So 20 games in 2 years. What's that, 20-5? A 20-5 stretch for Tennessee is incredible. That's an A-plus coaching job. Replacing the litany of talent you lost the NFL. 3 guys in drafting the top 3 rounds just offensively. Actually, 4, Darnell Wright. 4 of your offensive players going in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. It's great coaching. It's great recruiting. It's winning big games. If this was the case, how many ranked wins would they have this season? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Well, you can't control them for Carolina, A&M not being ranked. They'd probably only have 2 ranked wins in this situation right here, but they can't really control that. People would point to that Florida game because I don't. But last season they had South Carolina, which was the bad loss. Florida is a bad loss. I'll admit that. Okay, you can't control that. The past is in the past. Moving forward, though, the Missouri game, I don't think that'd be a bad loss. I think Missouri, if they won this game, would be looked at as the surprise team in the SEC with a lot of hype moving forward. So it's just this season. If I'll give a lot of grades postseason. I might grade every single team, like conference by conference. I would give this an A minus if this were to happen exactly. If they didn't lose to Florida and won 10 games again, I'd probably give it an A or maybe even an A plus, depending on how the rest of the season will. I'd give this an A minus for Tennessee if this happened exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people should be happy with. People like to recalibrate their expectations so quickly, but to lose what they lost, and if this were to happen, I think Tennessee would be a massive success story and just so much hype moving forward, considering they still have Nico in the wing right now. With that being said, I hope this wasn't too long of a video. I don't know how long it's going to be. I just didn't, I won't be able to do too many of these because pretty soon it won't be mid-season anymore. I might do 1 or 2 more. But I just wanted to get a quick video out right now. I didn't want to just be all top 25s and stuff like that. I found Tennessee extremely interesting, so I just wanted to do a solo video talking just about them and how the rest of their season could go. So if you enjoyed that, thanks for watching. Leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you next time. Peace.
It's out the motherfucking pack. Right out. But niggas don't know how to act.